The laugh, sharp and brittle, cut through the Riverside Grand's crystal ballroom. Coca-Cola arced, a dark, sticky rain, soaking Sophia Martinez from her neatly pinned hair to the starched white of her uniform. Humiliation, cold and liquid, plastered itself to her skin. Another nameless face for Manhattan's elite to mock, another nobody to douse in their careless fun. What they didn't know, couldn't possibly imagine, was that this nobody was the queen to a king, and her king was about to get the news. Sophia had been on her feet for 6 hours, a phantom weaving between tables laden with champagne flutes and the clatter of 1,000 too-loud conversations. The vast ballroom, aglow under a galaxy of chandeliers, felt like another planet. Invisible. That was the trick. Invisible to the titans of industry, the socialites whose fortunes could buy her modest Brooklyn apartment building 10 times over. A manager's clipped hiss, "More champagne, table 7, shattered her brief reprieve. She nodded, the silver tray a precarious extension of her arm, navigating a treacherous landscape of silk gowns and bespoke suits. Table 7, always table 7. 5 men, barely out of their 20s, awash in a champagne-fueled haze since cocktail hour, celebrating some Marlowe expansion. Their laughter grated, sharp with the entitlement of those who'd never known the sting of a no. Finally, drawled a blonde, perfectly coiffed man whose name tag declared him Ethan Marlowe. His wrist gleamed with a watch that could buy Sophia's car. Thought we'd die of thirst. My apologies, sir. Sophia's voice was a practiced monotone, a shield forged from years of serving demanding patrons. Professional. She poured, an automaton, as Ethan snatched a friend's phone. A fresh burst of cackles, a glimpse, drunken selfies, bottles brandished like trophies, rich boys playing at wildness. Sophia, right? Ethan's eyes, glazed with alcohol, squinted at her name tag. That's pretty. You got a boyfriend, Sophia? I'm married, sir. The words were a quiet declaration. Married? Exaggerated gasps from his cronies. Lucky guy. What's he do? Waiter? Uber driver? Sophia's jaw tightened, a tremor she fought to control. He works in construction. Hysterical laughter erupted. Construction, classic. Bet he's got a beer gut and a pickup truck. Sophia said nothing. The champagne bottle was empty. She should leave. Wait. Ethan pushed himself up, swaying, oblivious to the chasm opening between them. The din of the party swallowed his words from all but Sophia and his table. I got a question. His friends grinned. A phone raised to capture whatever humiliation was about to unfold. When you go home tonight, are you going to tell him about us? About how you serve rich people all day? He gestured wildly at the opulent ballroom. Does it bother you, seeing all this? Knowing you'll never have it? Sophia's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped. Have a good evening, gentlemen. She turned to flee. Hey, I'm talking to you. The next 3 seconds stretched into an eternity. He grabbed a glass of Coca-Cola, one of the mixers. 2 clumsy steps. His friends howled, the phone held aloft. The glass tipped. The cold shock of it. Ice cubes hit her forehead, cascaded down her face, her neck, into the crisp white fabric of her uniform. The room, just moments ago, a symphony of laughter, fell silent. Gasps, stares. Coca-Cola dripped from her hair, her eyelashes, a dark, viscous stain. Sophia stood frozen, the sticky rivulets a physical embodiment of the shame that choked her. The room spun. Ethan's friends were collapsing in laughter, slapping the table. Oh my God, dude! Did you get that? Send it to the group chat. What is going on here? The manager, his face flushed, materialized. His eyes darted from Sophia's ruined uniform to Ethan's smirk. Fear replaced his initial annoyance. She was rude to our guests, Ethan drawled, settling back into his chair. Just teaching some manners. The manager seized Sophia's arm. I am so sorry, Mr. Marlowe. Sophia, to the break room. Now. But I didn't. Now! Sophia stumbled away through a gauntlet of whispers and stares. Each step squelched. A young woman covered her mouth, eyes wide with second-hand mortification. An older matron turned away, Uncomfortable, silent. No one spoke. No one helped. In the frigid quiet of the staff bathroom, Sophia locked the door and stared into the mirror. Mascara streaked her cheeks, dark rivers against pale skin. Her hair, so carefully pinned that morning, was a matted, sticky mess. The blouse, ironed with such hopeful precision, was ruined. She didn't cry. Years ago, she'd learned that tears changed nothing. Her phone buzzed. "How's work, amore?" A text from Dante. Her fingers hovered. She could tell him. Tell Dante everything. But then what? People like the Marlows didn't face consequences. They owned buildings, managers, lawyers, half the city council. A complaint would cost her job. Dante, a construction worker going after a billionaire family? He'd look insane. No. Better to stay quiet. Better to survive. She typed, "Fine. Home by midnight. Love you." The coke-soaked blouse found its way into a trash bag. She donned a backup uniform, smoothed her hair as best she could, and returned to the battlefield, head bowed. What Sophia didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Marco, a kind young man from the kitchen staff, had seen it all. Marco, furious enough to do something stupid. Marco, who knew exactly who Sophia was married to. By dawn, Ethan Marlowe's humiliating act would land on the desk of Dante Morelli, the man who controlled every cement truck, every steel shipment, every construction permit in New York City, the man who had built the city's foundations from the ground up, the man whose wife had just been publicly shamed. That night, on the subway, Sophia sat, hair damp, a brittle smile plastered on her face, oblivious. She had no idea that in less than 7 days, the Marlowe family would receive a lesson they would never forget. You don't disrespect a queen, even when she wears an apron. Luca Romano had delivered bad news for Dante Morelli for 15 years. Arrests, betrayals, botched shipments. He'd perfected the art of the neutral face, the steady voice, but this morning, gripping the steering wheel of his SUV as he navigated pre-dawn Manhattan, his phone a hot weight in his pocket, his hands were white-knuckled. The video arrived at 5:47 a.m., an unknown number, no message, just a file. Luca almost deleted it, dismissing it as spam. Then he pressed play. 23 seconds. It was enough to curdle his blood. By 6:15, he was pulling up to Dante's Brooklyn brownstone, the one that never appeared on official records, with its cheerful window boxes and a basketball hoop that whispered of a normal family life. Maria, the housekeeper, let him in with a knowing glance. "He's having breakfast." Dante sat at the kitchen table, a white t-shirt stretched across broad shoulders, reading glasses perched on his nose. Newspapers fanned out like discarded maps of the world, an espresso cooled beside his hand. At 45, he still possessed the raw power of the construction worker he'd once been, his hands calloused and powerful. He looked every inch the working-class man beginning his day. He glanced up. "Luca, 6 in the morning? This better be important." Luca placed his phone on the worn wooden table. "You need to see this." Dante's brow furrowed slightly as he picked it up. Luca watched his boss's face as the tiny screen played out its ugly truth. The glittering ballroom, the easy laughter, Ethan Marlowe's sneering face, the glass tipping, Sophia's frozen humiliation as the black liquid cascaded over her. Dante's jaw clenched, his knuckles whitening around the phone. The video ended. The kitchen, usually alive with the scent of coffee, was utterly silent, save for the methodical tick of the wall clock. Dante's voice was a low rumble, dangerously quiet. "Last night, Riverside Grand Hotel, charity gala." "Yes, boss," Luca swallowed. "Kitchen worker sent it to me. Kid named Marco, clean. Works with Sophia sometimes. Said he couldn't sleep after watching it happen." Dante played the video again, and again. His face was a mask, but Luca knew that stillness. It was the same granite expression Dante wore before dismantling a rival crew in the 90s, the same face he presented when someone crossed a line from which there was no return. "She didn't tell me." Dante set the phone down precisely. She came home, said work was fine, kissed me goodnight like nothing happened. She probably didn't want you to worry. Worry, Dante scoffed, a hollow, bitter sound. My wife gets humiliated in public and she's worried about… me? He rose abruptly, pacing to the window. Outside, the neighborhood was slowly stirring. A garbage truck rumbled past. A man walked his dog. Normal life. The life Sophia had tried to protect with her silence. I want everything on the kid in the video, Dante said, his voice flat. Everything on the hotel. Who owns it? Who was there? Who… Boss. Luca's voice stopped him. There's more. Watch the background, around the 12-second mark. Dante picked up the phone again, his brow furrowed in concentration. He watched, paused, zoomed in, froze the frame. Behind Ethan, almost lost in the sparkling crowd, an older man in an expensive suit, late 50s, silver hair, an air of quiet power. He held a drink, engaged in conversation, oblivious to his son's ugly performance just 10 feet away. That's Richard Marlowe, Luca said quietly. Dante's face went pale. No. Yeah, Richard Marlowe. You're Richard Marlowe. Same guy. Dante sank heavily back into his chair. For the first time in all the years Luca had known him, his boss looked truly shaken. Richard Marlowe, the legitimate businessman, the one Dante had cultivated for 3 years, a carefully constructed web of shell companies and clean fronts. The real estate developer who relied on Dante's cement suppliers and union connections, but who could never, ever know who Dante Morelli truly was. Their arrangement had been perfect, profitable, quiet, deniable. 3 shared construction projects, $40 million worth of contracts, clean on paper but spiriting cash through back channels. Richard got his buildings built on time and under budget. Dante laundered his money through legitimate development deals. It had been, until now, a masterpiece of quiet power. The two men had met only twice before, always in neutral territory, their encounters carefully orchestrated. Richard Marlowe had seen Dante as nothing more than a well-connected contractor, a useful cog in his burgeoning empire. Dante, for his part, had intended to keep it exactly that way. Then came the whispered revelation. That's his son. Dante's voice was a low rasp as Luca's phone screen flickered to life. Ethan Marlowe, 27, heir to the family business, Princeton-educated, 0 work ethic. A photo of a sneering young man in a nightclub replaced the previous image. Party boy, DUIs covered up, harassment complaints settled quietly, daddy's golden child. Dante's gaze, however, was fixed on the background of the frozen frame, Richard Marlowe, a ghostly presence, witnessing the whole ugly scene. He was there, Dante breathed. He saw it happen. Looks like it, Luca confirmed, and he did nothing. Luca remained silent. There was nothing to say. A tremor of controlled rage began to replace the shock in Dante's eyes. He pushed back from the table, movement suddenly sharp, precise. He walked to the antiquated coffee maker, poured a cup, he then sat down, untouched. His mind raced, calculating. Call everyone, he said, his voice flat but laced with steel. Meeting tonight. I want intel on every Marlowe project, every contract, every permit, every dollar they owe. I want to know where they bank, where they're vulnerable, who they're afraid of. Boss, Luca ventured, a note of caution in his tone. If we move on them, the business arrangement is over. Dante's eyes, cold as slate, fixed on Luca. You don't get to humiliate my wife and then expect me to help build your empire. Luca nodded, understanding the finality in the declaration. What about Sophia? Does she know about any of this? Dante's expression softened, a fleeting moment of tenderness in the rising storm. She knows I work construction. She knows I do well. She doesn't know the rest. She thinks I'm a union foreman who got lucky. I want to keep it that way. That might be hard if… Dante's phone buzzed. Then Luca's. Both screens lit up with news alerts. Marlowe Group issues statement after viral incident. Luca scrolled frantically. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. The press release was everywhere, pushed to major outlets at 7 a.m. sharp. Marlowe Group regrets the unfortunate incident at last night's charity gala. While we support all service industry workers, preliminary investigations suggest the employee in question behaved unprofessionally toward guests prior to the incident. We take workplace conduct seriously and trust the Riverside Grand Hotel will address this matter appropriately. The Marlowe family remains committed to... The rest was corporate jargon, a meaningless shield. Dante read it twice. His face had gone cold, a dangerous stillness returning to his features. "They're blaming her," he murmured, his voice deadly soft. "They're covering their asses," Luca corrected, trying to control the narrative before it spreads. "Before it spreads," Dante repeated, setting his phone down with deliberate care. "They think this goes away with a press release. They think I'll read this and let it go because of our business. They think I need them more than they need me." He looked up at Luca then, and for the first time that morning, a smile touched his lips. It held no warmth. "Call the meeting for tonight. And Luca, find out everything about their current construction projects. I want to know which ones can't finish without us." "All of them, boss. They all need us." "Good." Dante picked up his coffee, finally taking a sip. "Then let's see how they build an empire when the foundation crumbles." Outside, the first tendrils of dawn painted the Brooklyn brownstones in gold. Inside, a war had just been declared. The Marlowe family just didn't know it yet. By 8 p.m., 7 men sat around a cold metal table under the harsh glare of fluorescent lights. This was the war room, tucked away in a Red Hook warehouse that officially stored restaurant equipment, unofficially served as Dante's inner sanctum, far from prying ears. These were Dante's captains, the men who ran his operations across the city: construction supply, trucking, unions, waste management. Legitimate businesses that generated millions while quietly siphoning funds from less legitimate sources. Tommy the Hammer Bergosi, 60 years old with knuckles like gnarled oak roots and zero patience, spoke first. "We grab the kid tonight. Make an example." "Agreed," chimed in Victor Chen, who oversaw the cement contracts, his voice clipped. "You disrespect the boss's wife, you disappear. Simple." Murmurs of agreement rippled around the table. Lucas stood in the corner, arms crossed, silent. He'd already had this conversation with Dante in the car. He knew how it would end. Dante sat at the head of the table, perfectly still, letting them talk. He'd barely spoken since they'd arrived, simply listening to the escalating suggestions. Grab Ethan. Scare him. Break something. Send a message. "We can make it look like a robbery," offered Joey Falcone, the youngest, a restless 35-year-old. "Rich kid gets mugged in the wrong neighborhood. Teaches him about respect." "Or we burn one of his cars," Tommy added, his voice gravelly. "That Porsche he drives gone. Let him explain that to Daddy." "Enough." Dante's voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the chatter like a surgical blade. The room fell silent. He stood, walking to a whiteboard against the wall. Someone had already taped up printed photos: Ethan Marlowe, Richard Marlowe, the Riverside Grand Hotel, the Marlowe Group logo. "What do you think happens?" Dante said slowly, turning to face them. "If we grab Ethan Marlowe tonight?" Tommy frowned. "He learns a lesson." "No." Dante shook his head. "His father calls the police. The real police. Not the ones we know. The FBI gets involved because kidnapping crosses state lines. Every camera in Manhattan gets reviewed. Every phone gets tapped." He turned back to the room, his gaze sweeping over each man. "We get heat we don't need over a spoiled kid." "So we do nothing?" Victor's voice rose with frustration. "They humiliate Sophia and we just take it?" "I didn't say we do nothing." Dante's eyes went cold. "I said we don't grab him. This isn't the 90s, Victor. We don't solve problems with baseball bats anymore." "Then what?" Tommy spread his hands in exasperation. "They already put out that press release calling Sophia unprofessional. They're making her the villain. Every hour we wait, their version becomes the truth." Dante had read the damaging press release a dozen times. Each reading made his jaw tighten further. Sophia had come home at midnight, exhausted, and gone straight to bed. She still didn't know it had gone public, didn't know strangers on the internet were debating whether she deserved it. She would wake up tomorrow to a nightmare. This isn't about Ethan, Dante said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of a far larger strategy. It's about Richard Marlowe. That's how we get their attention. He paused, letting the implications settle. Richard Marlowe is a businessman. He thinks in dollars and contracts. His son humiliated my wife because he's a spoiled brat who's never faced real consequences. But Richard, he saw it happen and did nothing. Then he put out that statement blaming Sophia. You know why? Silence. Because he thinks I need him more than he needs me. He thinks our business arrangement protects him. He thinks I'll swallow this insult to keep the money flowing. Dante's voice hardened into a dangerous rasp. He's wrong. Luca finally spoke from his corner, a click of a remote preceding his words. The Marlowe Group has 4 major projects in development right now. Combined value, $1.2 billion. The whiteboard screen changed, now displaying a complex spreadsheet. Hudson Yards Residential Tower, Tribeca Mixed-Use Development, Queens Waterfront Condos, Brooklyn Luxury Apartments. Luca highlighted each one in turn. Every single project uses our cement, our trucks, our steel suppliers, our union labor. Understanding dawned on faces around the table, a slow dawning light. They're also waiting on permits, Luca continued. The Brooklyn project needs environmental clearance. The Queens development needs zoning variances. Both are tied up in city council committees where we have friends. And their financing? Dante prompted. 2 primary lenders, Chase and Goldman, Luca replied. Both have short-term construction loans that need to be refinanced in the next 90 days if projects run over schedule. He smiled grimly, which they will, if anything goes wrong. Tommy leaned back, a slow, predatory gleam entering his eyes. You want to choke their business? I want to dismantle it, brick by brick, Dante corrected. Richard Marlowe humiliated my wife in public. I'm going to humiliate his empire. How long? Victor asked, leaning forward. 1 week, maybe less. Dante picked up a marker, writing on the whiteboard, contracts, permits, financing, reputation. These are his pressure points. We squeeze each one systematically. No violence, no obvious connections, just a series of very unfortunate problems that Richard can't solve. And the kid? Joey asked, eyes still hungry for direct retribution. Ethan? Dante paused, the marker poised. Ethan is a symptom. His father is the disease. But don't worry. When this is over, Ethan Marlowe will wish we'd just grabbed him. What's coming is worse than broken bones. He turned back to face his crew, his posture radiating lethal calm. Here's how this works. For the next 24 hours, nobody touches the Marlowe. No threatening calls, no vandalism, nothing. I want everyone focused on intelligence gathering. Victor, I need every detail on their construction timeline. Tommy, talk to your union contacts. Which projects have labor issues we can amplify? Joey, find out who their investors are and what makes them nervous. What about their finances? Victor asked. Luca and I will handle that. Dante checked his watch. We meet again tomorrow night, same time. Come prepared with options, not opinions. We're not street thugs anymore, gentlemen. We're businessmen. And we're about to teach the Marlowe family what happens when you forget who actually runs the city. The men stood, energized now, understanding the elegant brutality of the plan. This wasn't merely revenge. It was a carefully orchestrated demolition of power. As they filed out, Tommy paused at the door, his gaze lingering on Dante. Boss, what about Sophia? When do we tell her what we're doing? Dante's expression softened for a fleeting moment, a ghost of tenderness in the dim light. We don't. She's been through enough. When this is over, all she'll know is that the Marlowes apologized. The rest stays between us. Tommy nodded, then disappeared into the night. Alone with Luca, Dante pulled out his phone. A text from Sophia. Can't sleep. Keep thinking about work. I'm sorry I didn't tell you what happened. So she'd seen the news. His heart ached for her. He typed back, Nothing to be sorry for. I love you. We'll talk in the morning. Luca watched him. She's going to figure it out eventually. Maybe. Dante pocketed his phone, the soft glow of the screen vanishing. But by then, it'll be over. Come on, we have debt contracts to review. The warehouse plunged into darkness, the lock clicking shut like a final judgment. Outside, Brooklyn dreamed, oblivious. Across the river in Manhattan, Richard Marlowe probably slept too, nestled in the false confidence that his carefully worded press release had stanched the bleeding. He had no inkling that the bedrock of his empire was already splintering beneath the surface. The countdown had begun. Day 3 dawned in the sterile hum of a midtown coffee shop. Victor Chin sat opposite Dennis Wu, a city planning clerk and an old college friend bound by past favors. Their conversation drifted, a familiar rhythm of basketball scores, family updates, and the city's relentless rent hikes, until Victor slid a cream envelope across the table. "My daughter's school fundraiser," he murmured, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Hoping you can contribute." Dennis's eyes widened at the crisp $5,000 stack nestled inside, but his hesitation was fleeting. He'd taken Victor's money before. "Of course," he said, tucking the envelope away. "Happy to help. Appreciate it." Victor, meanwhile, was already scrolling on his phone, feigning disinterest. "Random question," he began. "You still working on that Marlowe project in Brooklyn? The waterfront development?" Dennis sipped his coffee, the steam momentarily clouding his face. "The Atlantic Yards expansion, yeah, still on my desk," he sighed. "Environmental impact review. Could take months." Victor's gaze sharpened. "Could it," he asked, his voice barely a whisper, "take longer?" A silent understanding passed between the two men. "Could take 6 months," Dennis conceded. "Maybe more if new concerns get raised." A shadow of a smile touched Victor's lips. "That would be unfortunate for them." Dennis met his eyes, the unspoken word hanging in the air. "Very. I'll make sure it gets the thorough review it deserves," he promised, the envelope a solid presence in his pocket. Victor simply nodded, then vanished into the bustling street, leaving behind one pressure point meticulously activated. Across town, the raw concrete skeletal frame of the Hudson Yards Tower clawed at the sky. Inside a temporary construction trailer, Tommy Begoy faced Mike Harrion, the project superintendent, a union man, one of theirs. "We got a problem, Tommy," Mike grunted, unfurling blueprints across a folding table. "Marlowe's behind schedule. They're pushing us to work faster, cut corners." Tommy's jaw tightened. "How far behind?" 6 weeks, Mike replied, jabbing a finger at the plans. "They need to pour foundation for the north wing by Friday, or they miss their deadline with the bank." He leaned closer. "And get this, the cement order they placed? It's coming from Jersey, not your suppliers." Tommy's eyes hardened. "They went around us?" Mike shrugged, a picture of feigned innocence. "Tried to save money, avoid union rates, you know. But that Jersey company, they're having truck problems this week. Mechanical issues. Weird how that happens." Tommy's smile was thin, edged with menace. "Very weird." He paused. "And our trucks, they could deliver, but the order would need to be placed through proper channels, at proper rates." Mike checked his watch, a flicker of mock regret in his eyes. "Even then, might take a few extra days to schedule. Shame." Tommy clapped him on the shoulder. "Keep me posted on their desperation level." As he exited the trailer, Tommy's phone was already at his ear. "Dante, Hudson Yards is bleeding time. They're about to miss a critical pour." A pause. "Good. Let them sweat." In a glass-walled eyrie high above lower Manhattan, Luca sat across from Rebecca Morse, a risk analyst at Goldman Sachs. They'd dated briefly, years ago. The connection was now a thin thread of polite cordiality. She owed him nothing, yet she remembered the quiet way he'd once steered her brother clear of dangerous waters. "I need information," Luca said, his voice low, almost intimate. "Marlowe Group, what's their situation?" Rebecca's gaze flickered to her computer screen, a conflict playing out on her face. "Luca, I can't just—" "Off the record," he interrupted softly. "Old friend asking another old friend." She sighed, her fingers dancing across the keyboard. They're leveraged heavily for major projects, all financed with short-term construction loans. Her gaze met his. The terms require completion milestones every 90 days, or the interest rate jumps 2 points. How close are they to those milestones? Luca asked, the air thickening. Close enough that any delays would be catastrophic. Rebecca lowered her voice to a near whisper. Between you and me, Goldman is already nervous. Marlowe's last quarterly report showed cost overruns. If these projects stall, we might not refinance. She paused. Which means they'd need to find new lenders fast. And if they can't, they'd have to liquidate assets, sell properties, possibly declare bankruptcy on the development arm. She looked at him carefully, a question in her eyes. Why are you asking? Luca rose, the picture of casual indifference. Just curious about the market. He gave her a polite nod. Thanks, Rebecca. Give my best to your brother. Outside, he pulled out his phone. Dante, his text read. Goldman is wobbly. One more shake and they bolt. By evening, Dante's team converged once more in the Red Hook warehouse. This time the whiteboard was a mosaic of scrawled details. Project 1, Hudson Yards, Residential Tower. Value, 340 miners. Status, 6 weeks behind. Vulnerability, cement supply disrupted. Foundation pour deadline Friday. Bank, Chase, nervous about timeline. Project 2, Tribeca mixed-use development. Value, 280. Status, awaiting steel delivery. Vulnerability, our steel suppliers can delay shipments indefinitely. Bank, Goldman, anxious about cost overruns. Project 3, Queens Waterfront Condos. Value, 420 meter. Status, zoning variance pending. Vulnerability, city council contacts can stall approval for months. Bank, Goldman, same loan officer as Tribeca. Project 4, Brooklyn Atlantic Yards expansion. Value, 380 meter. Status, environmental review. Vulnerability, review process extended to 6+ months. Bank, Chase, largest exposure to Marlowe Group. Dante surveyed the board like a general mapping a battlefield. Total exposure, 1.4 billion if you count the financing, Luca murmured, adjusting his glasses. But the actual construction value is 1.2, and it all depends on our cooperation. Victor stepped forward. The Brooklyn permits are frozen for at least 6 months. I've got 3 different city departments ready to discover new concerns: traffic impact, historic preservation, wetlands protection. Take your pick. Dante turned to Tommy. The unions? Tommy grinned, a predatory flash of white. Ready to walk on 2 projects if negotiations stall. We can manufacture labor disputes that tie them up for weeks. All perfectly legal, of course. Just workers demanding fair treatment. Joey spoke up, his voice tight with suppressed satisfaction. I tracked their investor calls. Richard's been reassuring people all week that everything's fine, but 3 small investors already pulled out of the Queens project. They're spooked by the negative press from the Sophia incident. Dante's smile was grim. Good. He circled the 2 bank names on the board, Chase and Goldman. 2 lenders for vulnerable projects. Luca, can we buy their debt? Working on it, Luca confirmed. I've got 3 shell companies ready to purchase distressed construction loans. If the banks get nervous enough, they'll sell at a discount just to reduce exposure. Dante did the math in his head. Control the debt, control the oxygen. Marlowe couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't make deals without going through people they didn't know were connected to Dante. Here's the sequence, Dante announced, marker in hand. Tomorrow morning, Hudson Yards misses their foundation pour. Tomorrow afternoon, steel delivery to Tribeca gets delayed. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. By evening, Marlowe will be dealing with 2 crisis situations. That's when the banks start making worried phone calls. Luca's eyes gleamed. And when they're panicking about timelines, that's when my shell companies approach the banks about buying distressed debt. We swoop in, looking like saviors. Victor nodded, a flicker of admiration in his gaze. They won't even know we're behind it. Exactly. Dante capped the marker. Richard Marlowe thinks this is about a spoiled kid pouring soda. He doesn't understand he's already losing a war. He doesn't know he's fighting. Tommy leaned forward, anticipation in his eyes. When does he realize? when it's too late. Dante checked his phone. A news alert flashed. Marlowe Group stock down 3% on construction concerns. The market was already scenting blood. Gentlemen, Dante said, his voice dropping to a low, resonant tone. We're not just mapping weak points anymore. We're activating them. He looked at each man, his gaze unwavering. As of tomorrow morning, the Marlowe empire starts crumbling. Slowly enough that they don't panic. Fast enough that they can't stop it. What about Ethan? Joey asked, breaking the silence. Kids still posting on social media like nothing happened, partying in the Hamptons this weekend. Dante's expression hardened, a cold fire in his eyes. Let him party. When his father's empire collapses, Ethan will learn that some humiliations can't be fixed with Daddy's money. The meeting adjourned. Men dispersed into the Brooklyn night, each with their assignments. Dante remained, staring at the whiteboard. 4 projects, 2 banks, 1 week. His phone buzzed. Sophia. Can't believe I'm trending on Twitter. People are so cruel, but I'm okay. We're okay. His chest tightened. She was trying to be strong, trying not to worry him. He typed back, You're the strongest person I know. This will pass, I promise. What he didn't say. It will pass because I'm going to make sure the people who hurt you lose everything. Dante reached for the light switch. Tomorrow, he whispered into the quiet, the pressure begins. The Marlows were about to learn that foundations don't just hold up buildings, they hold up empires. And Dante controlled every single one. The call came at 2:47 a.m. Richard Marlowe fumbled for his phone, the glaring screen showing Project Manager Hudson Yards. He sat bolt upright, his wife groaning softly beside him. This better be important, Mike. The superintendent's voice was tight, strained. Mr. Marlowe, we have a problem. The cement trucks didn't show up. Richard's brain, still swimming through a fog of sleep, struggled to process. What do you mean didn't show up? We have a critical pour scheduled for 6 a.m. I know, sir, Mike stammered, but the Jersey supplier called an hour ago, said their entire fleet is down for emergency maintenance, transmission failures across multiple trucks. They can't deliver all of them at once. Richard was fully awake now, alarm bells clanging. That's impossible. That's what I said, Mike's voice cracked, but they're adamant. Earliest they can deliver is next week. Next week. Richard ripped off the covers, pacing the expensive rug. We miss this pour. We miss our milestone. Chase will trigger the penalty clause. That's $2 million. I'm aware, sir. Call our backup suppliers. Someone in this city has cement trucks. I've been calling for an hour. Mike's voice was thick with defeat. Everyone's booked solid or having equipment issues. It's like the whole supply chain picked tonight to fall apart. Richard's stomach plummeted. Keep trying. Offer double rates. Triple. I don't care. We cannot miss that deadline. He slammed the phone down, immediately dialing his COO, then his head of operations. Within 20 minutes, his entire executive team was awake, barking orders into phones, pulling strings in the dead of night. But no one could help. At 6:30 a.m., the Hudson Yards site lay silent under the indifferent morning sky. No cement trucks rumbled, no cheerful shouts from foremen, just union workers clocking in, then standing in idle knots, drawing hourly pay for nothing. At precisely 7:15 a.m., Richard Marlowe's phone shrieked again. It was the Tobecca project manager, his voice a tight wire. Please tell me you have good news, Richard said, the words a desperate prayer. Steel delivery delayed, Mr. Marlowe. Supplier says a traffic accident. They'll try again tomorrow. Tomorrow? Richard's voice was a raw rasp. We're already behind schedule. I know, sir, as frustrated as you are. Richard slammed the phone onto his home office desk. It pinballed off a leather-bound book, then off the corner of his plush couch. 2 monumental projects, same morning, both critical delays. This wasn't coincidence. This was an ambush. By 9 a.m., Richard was ensconced in his Marlowe Group headquarters, a glass monolith in Midtown that scraped the sky and offered panoramic views of Central Park. His executive team, Patricia Vance, his COO, Martin Ross, his CFO sat arrayed before him, their faces a tableau of exhaustion, confusion, and mounting dread. "Talk to me," Richard demanded, his voice low, dangerous. "What the hell is happening?" Patricia, ever the pragmatist, projected a spreadsheet onto the wall. Hudson Yards' cement supplier claims mechanical failure across their fleet. Tibeka steel shipment blocked by a mysterious traffic incident. But here's the kicker, Richard. I called other developers. Nobody else is having supply problems. Just us, Richard stated, a lead weight settling in his gut. Just us. Martin Ross cleared his throat, his gaze drifting from Richard's unblinking stare to the spreadsheet. The timing, Richard, is unfortunate. Chase called this morning. They're aware of the Hudson Yards delay. If we don't pour foundation by Friday, the penalty clause activates. That's $2 million. Plus, they're considering raising our interest rate. On what grounds? The words were ripped from Richard. Failure to meet milestone deadlines. It's in the contract. Richard's jaw hardened, a muscle ticking violently at his temple. One delay and they're panicking? It's not just the delay, Martin corrected, typing rapidly on his laptop. Our stock dropped 3% yesterday. After, the waitress incident. Investors are jittery. Chase is asking if we're experiencing broader operational problems. The waitress incident. Sophia Martinez. Richard had imagined his carefully worded press release would be the definitive end, a tidy containment of the whole messy affair. Instead, it had detonated, sending shrapnel across the internet. Think pieces on wealth inequality, social media outrage in a torrent, his son Ethan's smug face plastered across every gossip site imaginable. And now this. "Get me new suppliers," Richard commanded, his voice edged with steel. "I don't care what it costs." "We're trying," Patricia said, her voice strained. "But every contractor we've called is either fully booked or—" She hesitated, her eyes flickering across the room. "Or what?" Richard prompted, leaning forward. "Or giving us runaround quotes 3 times the normal rates. Delivery windows that are useless. It's like someone poisoned the well, Richard." Richard rose, walking to the towering window. 43 floors below, Manhattan pulsed, a vibrant tapestry of construction cranes and ceaseless traffic. His city, his empire. Someone was doing this. Someone with enough reach to snarl supply lines, enough cold power to coordinate attacks on multiple projects simultaneously. But who? At noon, Ethan Marlowe, oblivious to the unraveling empire, lounged by the cerulean pool of a Hamptons beach club, a mimosa glinting in his hand. Laughter bubbled up around him. "Dude, you're trending again," his friend Chase said, scrolling through his phone. "People are still talking about the waitress thing." Ethan rolled his eyes. "It was a joke. People need to chill." "Your dad's press release didn't help," Chase mused. "Made it worse, actually." "Dad knows what he's doing," Ethan waved a dismissive hand. "By next week, nobody will even remember her name." His phone buzzed, a familiar name on the screen. Dad calling again. Ethan declined the call, the bright sun glinting off his screen. He'd endured one lecture this morning about family reputation and being more careful. One was quite enough. "Everything cool?" Chase asked, sensing the shift in Ethan's mood. "Fine. Just Dad stressing about work stuff." Ethan signaled for another mimosa. Nothing I need to worry about. What Ethan didn't know, what his father was frantically trying to tell him, was that Marlowe Group stock had plummeted another 2% by lunchtime. 2 major investors were demanding emergency calls. Ugly rumors were beginning to circulate, whispers of operational instability. The empire wasn't just stressed, it was showing deep, spiderweb cracks. By 4:00 p.m., Richard had made 17 calls. Every supplier, every contact, spun the same flimsy tale. Backed up equipment, scheduling conflicts. Some offered profuse apologies. Others were oddly curt, their voices tight with unspoken meaning. He sat alone in his office, staring at project timelines that now seemed like cruel fantasies. A soft knock at the door. His assistant. "Mr. Marlowe, Goldman Sachs on line 3. Goldman, his other major lender." Richard picked up. "James, good to hear from you." James Rothman's voice was polished, professional, and chillingly cool. Richard, I wanted to touch base about your projects. We're hearing some concerning reports. Minor setbacks, Richard deflected, his grip tightening on the receiver. We're addressing them. Minor setbacks that are affecting two projects simultaneously? Richard, our risk assessment team is getting nervous. There's nothing to be nervous about. We have the situation under control. Do you? A beat of heavy silence stretched between them. Because our analysts are also looking at the negative publicity from earlier this week, combined with these construction delays, it's creating a concerning pattern. Richard's knuckles whitened. James, we've worked together for 10 years. When have I ever failed to deliver? There's a first time for everything, Rothman replied, utterly devoid of warmth. Look, I'm not making threats. I'm giving you a friendly heads up. If these delays continue, if more problems emerge, Goldman will need to reassess our position. We have shareholders to answer to. I understand. I hope you do. Fix this, Richard. Quickly. The line went dead with a soft click. Richard sat in the sudden silence, his reflection staring back from the dark, inert computer screen. Two banks circling like vultures, two vital projects stalled, investors panicking, his stock hemorrhaging value. 48 hours ago, everything had been fine, solid bedrock. Now, it felt like the very ground beneath him was liquefying. He thought of Sofia Martinez, the waitress, the video that wouldn't die. Could this nightmare be connected? Some intricate act of retaliation? No, impossible. She was a nobody, a restaurant worker. What power could she possibly wield over him, over Marlowe Group? He shook off the creeping paranoia. This was just spectacularly bad luck. Awful timing. It would pass. Richard pulled up his contacts, his fingers flying across the screen. There had to be someone who could deliver cement. Someone who owed him a favor, a big one. What he didn't realize, what he couldn't possibly see, was that every call he made, every favor he tried to pull, every fragile string he attempted to tug, was inextricably woven into a web that led back to one man, a man whose wife had been humiliated on camera while Richard stood idly by, a man who was just getting started. Dante received updates throughout the day. Each terse report, each new setback for Marlowe Group, brought a subtle, dangerous smile to his lips. Hudson Yards stalled. Tebeka stalled. Both banks circling. Stock down 5% total. He looked at Luca, his gaze hard, steady. Tomorrow we tighten the noose. The war had begun, and Richard Marlowe was losing without even knowing he was fighting. Day 4 began with a phone call Richard Marlowe never expected. Mr. Marlowe, this is Diane Chen from the Department of Environmental Protection. The voice was polite, bureaucratic, and utterly devoid of mercy. I'm calling about your Queens waterfront project. Richard's stomach plummeted. Another problem. What about it? We've received concerns regarding potential wetland disturbance. We'll need to conduct an additional environmental impact assessment before we can approve your zoning variance. We already passed environmental review months ago, Richard protested, his voice rising. New information has come to light. Possible habitat for a protected bird species. Diane's voice remained calm, unwavering. We take these matters very seriously. How long will this take? He pressed, a knot of ice forming in his chest. Hard to say. Could be 60 to 90 days. Maybe longer if we find issues. 90 days. The Queen's project was slated to break ground in 3 weeks. Goldman was already on edge about Tebeka. Now this. This is ridiculous, Richard stated, struggling to keep his voice level. Who raised these concerns? Anonymous tip to our office, Diane said, but we're obligated to investigate all credible reports. Her tone left no doubt that the conversation was over. You'll receive official notification by end of business today. She hung up. Richard stared at his silent phone. An anonymous tip. Just like the cement trucks mysteriously failing. Just like the steel deliveries getting delayed. Just like every other piece of his carefully constructed world collapsing this week. This wasn't coincidence. Someone, somewhere, was masterminding his destruction. By 10 a.m., the rumors ignited. They began on Urban Development Watch, a niche blog covering New York real estate, a post titled, "Marlowe Group Projects Face Multiple Delays. What's Really Going On?" The article was carefully worded, avoiding direct accusations, but it asked uncomfortable questions. Sources close to several Marlowe Group construction sites report unusual delays this week: cement suppliers, steel deliveries, and now permit issues. While each incident appears isolated, industry insiders are wondering if there's a deeper problem. Some point to the viral video of Ethan Marlowe's behavior at last week's charity gala as evidence of a company culture problem. Others suggest possible financial instability. By noon, 3 other real estate blogs had picked up the story. By 2 p.m., the New York Post real estate section ran a brief, damning item: Marlowe Group faces construction headaches. By 4 p.m., Richard's investor line was ringing off the hook. "Richard, what's going on?" Marcus Chen, a Hong Kong investor with $30 million in the Tebeka project, didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I'm reading about permit problems, supply chain issues. Should I be concerned?" "Absolutely not, Marcus. Just some unfortunate timing." "Unfortunate timing?" Marcus's voice sharpened, cutting through Richard's forced calm. "I put serious money into this development based on your timeline. Now, I'm hearing it could be delayed months. We're working through some temporary setbacks. The same week your son becomes a viral villain? The same week your stock drops 5%? Forgive me for seeing a pattern?" Richard's jaw clenched. "Marcus, I've never missed a deadline with you, have I?" "There's always a first time," Chen replied, his voice chillingly flat. "I want a call tomorrow with concrete answers, Richard, not promises." Answers. The line went dead. 3 more calls followed, each from a different investor, each voice laden with the same corrosive anxiety. Everyone demanded reassurance Richard couldn't provide, because he still didn't understand the full scope of what was happening. Patricia Vance knocked on Richard's office door at 5 p.m. Her face was grim. "More bad news?" Richard asked, the words barely a whisper. The city council's vote on the Brooklyn Atlantic Yards variance dissolved into thin air, officially postponed. "More time to review community feedback," they claimed, a phrase that tasted like ash in Richard Marlowe's mouth. Community feedback? He'd personally overseen the addressing of every last concern months ago. Now a fresh wave had allegedly materialized: traffic studies, historic preservation, even a council member clamoring for a full public hearing. Patricia sank heavily into her chair, her gaze locking onto Richard's. "Something's wrong," she intoned, her voice a low thrum of alarm. "This isn't just bureaucratic drag. It's coordinated." Richard felt a cold filament of dread tighten in his gut. He'd been wrestling with the same disquiet all day. Who wielded such invisible, pervasive power? Who could simultaneously snarl supply chains, freeze city permits, and seed real estate blogs with perfectly timed, damaging narratives? "Someone with serious reach," he murmured, the words feeling inadequate even as he spoke them. "Connections across industries." Patricia's next words hung heavy in the air, a bell tolling a dark truth. "Someone we pissed off." Richard's mind raced, sifting through the usual suspects: a rival developer, a cutthroat competitor. But this felt different, more intimate. A blade aimed not just at profit, but at pride. Then a name surfaced from the murky depths of his memory. "Sophia Martinez," he said slowly, the syllables tasting foreign on his tongue. "The waitress from the video. Do we know anything about her?" Patricia's fingers danced across her tablet, the screen a glowing portal into the woman's life. Sophia Martinez, 32, works at Riverside Grand Hotel, 4 years, lives in Brooklyn, married. She scrolled, her face sharpening with discovery. Husband is Dante Morelli, listed occupation, construction contractor. Construction. The word echoed in the sudden silence of the office, turning Richard's blood to ice. "What kind of contractor?" His voice was a strained whisper, barely audible even to himself. Patricia tapped again, her expression draining of color. "It doesn't specify, but—" She paused, and then the full, terrible weight of the connection crashed down. Richard Morelli. That name sounds familiar. From where? Richard demanded, a tremor starting in his hands. Your shell company contracts, she answered, her gaze unwavering. The ones that sourced cement and steel at below market rates. Didn't we sign papers with a Morelli construction group 3 years ago? Richard's hands began to shake uncontrollably. He fumbled with his phone, pulling up the encrypted files from his private lawyer, the contracts he'd barely glanced at, dismissing them as mere legalities, triumphs of fiscal ingenuity that saved him millions. There it was, stark and undeniable, Morelli Construction Group. Dante Morelli, principal. The man whose wife Richard's son, Ethan, had humiliated. The man who, through layers of legal artifice, controlled the very supply chain that underpinned all 4 of the Marlowe Group's colossal projects. Oh God, Richard whispered, the sound a ragged exhalation. Patricia stared. What? I need to make a call. Richard's voice was hollow, stripped bare. Get out, Patricia, now. She left, the door closing behind her with a soft click that resonated like a pistol shot. His fingers, still trembling, scrolled through his contacts, past the familiar names until he found it. The private number, used only twice before, the direct line to Dante Morelli's office. He pressed call. It rang once, twice, a third time. You've reached Morelli Construction. Leave a message. Voicemail. Richard knew, with a chilling certainty, that Dante had to be there, had to be watching that number. Dante, it's Richard Marlowe. I think we need to talk about recent developments. Call me back, please. He hung up, the silence after the click an unbearable presence. 5 minutes crawled by, then 10, then 20. No call back. Richard tried again. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. Again. The message was as clear as a shouted command. Dante Morelli wasn't taking his calls. At precisely 7 p.m., Richard sat alone in his office, the city lights twinkling below like distant mocking stars. His empire, built piece by painstaking piece over 3 decades, was not just shaking, it was fracturing. Stock down 7%. 2 banks suddenly nervous, investors demanding answers, projects stalled, all because his idiotic son had poured soda on a waitress. No, not just that. All because Richard had stood by and watched it happen. All because he'd then released that dismissive press statement, blaming her, painting her as a nobody. All because he'd assumed she was powerless, someone who could be crushed without consequence. He'd been catastrophically wrong. His phone buzzed, vibrating on the polished desktop. A text from an unknown number. Stop calling. You'll get your meeting when I'm ready. Not before. Richard's hands, still unsteady, typed back. I can explain. Let me fix this. The response was immediate. You can't fix humiliation with a phone call, Richard. You should know that by now. Then, nothing. The number went dark. Richard sat in the profound silence of his office, understanding finally settling over him like a burial shroud. Dante Morelli wasn't just angry. He wasn't looking for an apology or a payoff. He was systematically dismantling everything Richard had built, brick by agonizing brick, and Richard, in his transactional arrogance, had handed him the blueprints 3 years ago, the day they became partners. Outside, night had truly fallen over Manhattan. In the glass towers, the skeletal construction sites, and the hushed city offices, the invisible pieces of Dante's intricate plan continued to fall into place. The noose was tightening, and Richard Marlowe had just realized his neck was in it. Richard's emergency board meeting began at 8 p.m. sharp in the Marlowe Group's executive conference room. 12 figures, a landscape of exhaustion, sat around the gleaming Polish mahogany table, lawyers, executives, board members. We're being targeted, Richard stated, no preamble needed. Systematically, deliberately, and I know by whom. He laid it all out. Dante Morelli, the shell companies, Sophia Martinez, the intricate web of connections he'd been too blind to see. Gerald Strauss, his head counsel, went visibly pale. You're saying our primary supplier is married to the woman in the video? I'm saying our primary supplier is the woman's husband, Richard corrected, his voice gravelly, and he's been cutting off our air supply since Tuesday. Then we sue him, Patricia snapped, her fury barely contained. Breach of contract, tortious interference. We bury him in litigation. Gerald held up a hand, a weary gesture. Wait. Let me pull those contracts. His fingers flew across his laptop, his expression growing darker with each passing second. Finally, he looked up, a grim set to his jaw. We can't sue. What do you mean we can't sue? Richard's voice rose, edged with desperation. He's deliberately sabotaging our projects. Technically, he isn't, Gerald countered, his voice flat. Morelli Construction Group doesn't directly supply us. They supply the suppliers who supply us. The contracts are structured through intermediaries, very carefully structured. He traced the Byzantine connections on his screen. If we sue, we'd have to explain these shell company arrangements in court. That means exposing the financial structures we've used to avoid taxes and regulatory oversight for 3 years. A profound silence descended, heavy and suffocating. How bad? Patricia asked, her voice barely a whisper. Federal investigation bad? IRS audit bad? Gerald removed his glasses, his eyes tired. Possibly RICO charges bad. These contracts were designed for plausible deniability. They work great when everyone's cooperating. But if we sue, we're essentially revealing our own illegal financial engineering. Richard felt the walls of the room closing in, the air growing impossibly thin. So, we just let him destroy us? I'm saying litigation isn't an option, Gerald clarified. At least not against Morelli directly. He thought for a moment. What about City Hall? Can we pressure the permit offices to speed things up? Patricia shook her head, a bitter twist to her lips. Already tried. Called in every favor. Everyone's suddenly unable to help. Either they're genuinely backlogged or someone's gotten to them first. Someone named Morelli, Richard muttered, the name a curse. Martin, the CFO, cleared his throat, a dry, nervous sound. There's another problem. Goldman called again this afternoon. They're conducting a routine review of our loan portfolio. He paused, letting the implication hang. Translation: they're looking for reasons to call our loans early or trigger penalty clauses. Can they do that if we miss contracted milestones? Richard asked, dread curling in his stomach. Yes. Martin's voice was bleak. Hudson Yards missed its foundation deadline. Tribeca is 3 weeks behind. If the Queen's project gets delayed 60 days because of this environmental review, we'll miss that deadline too. Martin pulled up a spreadsheet, the figures cold and unforgiving. 3 missed milestones triggers a review clause. We need to refinance immediately or face default. How much are we talking about? $420 million due in 30 days if they invoke the clause. The number hung in the air like an unexploded bomb. We don't have that kind of liquidity, Patricia said, stating the obvious. I know. Richard stood, pacing to the window, the city a cold, indifferent sprawl below him. $420 million. They could perhaps scrape together half by selling non-core assets, assets they couldn't afford to lose. We could bring in new investors, someone offered tentatively. Martin shook his head, a gesture of defeat. With our stock down 7% and construction delays making headlines, no major investor will touch us right now. Not at terms we could accept. Then we go back to Morelli, Richard declared, his jaw tight. Make him an offer, money, ownership stake, whatever he wants. He's not answering your calls, Patricia reminded him, her tone tinged with a devastating blend of irony and despair. Then I'll go to him, to his office, his home. Wherever he is, I'll find him. And what? Gerald interrupted, his voice sharp, devoid of hope. Apologize? Beg? He's not doing this for money, Richard. He's doing this because your son humiliated his wife, and you backed Ethan instead of making it right. Richard turned on him, his face contorted. What was I supposed to do? Throw my own son under the bus? Yes, Patricia's voice cracked through the room, raw and searing. That's exactly what you should have done. Issue a real apology. Fire Ethan from his position. Make it clear that behavior was unacceptable. Instead, you blamed the victim and assumed no one would care about a waitress. I didn't know who she was married to. That shouldn't have mattered. Patricia's eyes blazed, a furious light. Even if she'd been married to nobody, what Ethan did was wrong. But you were more worried about protecting the family name than doing the right thing. Now we're all paying for it. Silence fell once more, deeper and more desolate than before. No one met Richard's gaze. Across town, Ethan Marlowe sat in a plush booth at a trendy Soho nightclub, oblivious. Bottle service glittered on the table, models adorned either side of him. His phone buzzed relentlessly. Dad, Patricia, Martin, but he ignored them all. Your dad's blowing up your phone, his friend Tyler observed, gesturing towards the insistent vibrations. Always is. Ethan took a shot, the burn a familiar comfort. Probably wants to lecture me more about the video, like I need another speech about family reputation. Dude, have you seen the news? Your company stock is tanking. Stock goes up, stock goes down. Ethan waved a dismissive hand, a gesture of inherited carelessness. Dad always figures it out. That's what he does. What Ethan didn't see, what he was too drunk and too privileged to even register, was that his father was standing on the precipice of a financial abyss. That 4 major construction projects were grinding to a halt, banks circling like vultures, and the Marlowe family empire was experiencing the first truly existential crisis in its celebrated history. All because Ethan had thought it would be funny to pour Coca-Cola on a waitress. Back in the frigid conference room, Richard's phone buzzed again. Another text from the unknown number. Your lawyers are probably telling you that you can't sue me. They're right. Your politicians are probably not returning calls. Also correct. You built your empire on my foundation, Richard. I can remove it brick by brick. The question is, how much do you want to lose before you're ready to talk? Richard stared at the message, his own reflection a ghostly overlay on the phosphorescent screen of his phone. A shadow fell over him. Gerald, his unflappable counsel, leaned closer. Is that him? Richard gave a terse nod. What does he want? Gerald's voice was low, edged with a concern he rarely showed. He wants me to suffer. Richard's voice was a hollow echo in the grand, silent office. To understand what it feels like to be powerless. He wants me to beg. Then maybe you should, Patricia's voice, quiet but firm, cut through the tense air. Before there's nothing left to save. Richard's gaze drifted around the polished mahogany table. Tired faces, fear haunting every eye. These people, his people, had families, mortgages, careers utterly entwined with the Marlowe Group. If the company crumbled, they all went down. He pictured Ethan, probably drunk in some neon-soaked club, utterly oblivious. He thought of Sophia Martinez, the woman he'd dismissed as a nobody, a fleeting inconvenience. He remembered the press release he'd authorized, the one that callously blamed her. Patricia was right. He had made the wrong choice. Every single turn. And now, the bill a monstrous, unforgiving sum was coming due. Set up a meeting, Richard finally said, his voice raspy. With Morelli. Whatever it takes, tell him I'm ready to talk. He's not answering. Then send a message through his office, Richard commanded, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. Tell him. He paused, a bitter swallow. Tell him Richard Marlowe is ready to apologize properly this time. Gerald nodded once, expression less, then pivoted and left to make the call. Richard sank heavily into his chair, suddenly feeling the crushing weight of all 58 years. In just 4 days, his empire had plummeted from soaring success to a flatlining presence on life support, and the man holding the plug, someone he had never once considered a threat. His phone buzzed, a new message. Tomorrow, come alone, address to follow. Richard closed his eyes. The war, it seemed, was already over. Now came the surrender. Day 5. Lucas sat in a Queen's diner, the aroma of stale coffee and fried food hanging heavy in the air. Across from him, three men in expensive suits picked at their pastries, looking exactly what they were. Investment bankers eager to offload toxic assets before anyone asked too many questions. "Let me get this straight," Michael Chun from Chase Securities began, his tone laced with skepticism. "You want to buy Marlowe Group's construction debt now, when everyone knows they're in freefall?" "Precisely," Luca replied, his voice calm, betraying no urgency. "That's exactly when we buy. My clients specialize in distressed assets. We see opportunity where others," he gestured vaguely, "see risk." "Your clients being Sentinel Capital Partners," Lisa Park from Goldman Sachs interjected, her eyes sharp. "Private equity, very quiet, very well funded." Luca slid a sheaf of documents across the table. All legitimate, all traceable to a Cayman Islands shell company that for all intents and purposes existed only on paper. "We're prepared to purchase the Hudson Yards and Tribeca debt at 90 cents on the dollar. Today." Michael and Lisa exchanged a quick, almost imperceptible glance. The total debt was $180 million. At 90 cents, their banks would take a small loss. Yes, but they would shed their exposure to a potentially catastrophic unfolding. "Why so eager?" Lisa pressed, suspicion lacing her words. Luca offered a tight, almost imperceptible smile. "Because in 3 months, when Marlowe stabilizes, that debt will be worth full value again. We're patient. And we're confident they will recover." It was a lie, of course. Dante had no intention of letting Marlowe recover. But these bankers didn't need to know that. "But we need an answer by noon. After that, the offer expires." Michael checked his phone, no doubt messaging his superiors. "We'll need to review." "No time for review," Luca cut him off, standing abruptly. "Noon deadline. Take it, or keep riding the Marlowe sinking ship." He left a business card on the table. "My number is on the card. Call me when you decide." He turned and walked out, leaving them to stare at the meticulously prepared paperwork. By 9:30 a.m., Luca had met with 2 more banking groups. The same pitch, the same tight deadline, the same barely concealed desperation from the men in suits. By 10:15 a.m., his phone began to ring. Chase agreed first. 90 cents on the dollar for the Hudson Yards debt. $85 million wired before lunch. Goldman followed at 10:47 a.m., shedding the Tribeca and a portion of the Queen's debt, another $95 million. A smaller regional bank, holding the financing for a Brooklyn project, called at 11:20 a.m., so eager to dump their exposure, they accepted 85 cents on the dollar, $48 million. By noon, Dante's carefully constructed network of shell companies controlled $228 million in Marlowe Group debt, roughly 35% of their total outstanding construction financing. Luca called Dante from his car, the city skyline a blurred backdrop against the grime-streaked window. "It's done. We own them." "Good." Dante's voice was a low rumble. "Now we wait." On a Richard's phone rang at 1:15 p.m. Robert Crawford, his banker at Chase, sounded distinctly uncomfortable. "Richard, I wanted to give you a heads up about something." "What now?" Richard's voice was flat, devoid of emotion. He'd barely slept. "We sold your Hudson Yards debt this morning to a private equity firm registered as Sentinel Capital Partners." Richard sat bolt upright. "You what?" "It's standard practice," Crawford hurried on, his voice betraying a sliver of defensiveness. "Banks regularly sell construction debt to manage portfolio risk. I wanted you to know because, technically, your primary lender has changed." "Who are these people?" Richard demanded, a cold dread beginning to seep into his bones. "Sentinel Capital, private firm, offshore registration. They specialize in distressed assets." "We're not distressed." The silence that followed from Robert Crawford spoke volumes. Richard's stock was down 9%. 3 projects were stalled. The press was circling like vultures. "From our perspective, Richard, that was prudent risk management." "How much of our debt did you sell?" "Just the Hudson Yards project. $85 million. Richard's hands went cold. "Who else is selling?" "I can't speak for other banks." "Robert," Richard's voice dropped, a dangerous edge creeping in. "Who else?" "You should probably call Goldman." Richard hung up and immediately dialed Lisa Park. We were going to call you, she said, defensive. Market conditions made it necessary. How much? Richard snarled. The Tribeca debt and part of the Queen's financing, $95 million total. Lisa rushed on. Richard, this doesn't change anything operationally. You still make the same payments, same terms. To whom? To the Sentinel Capital and a few other entities. Look, this is completely normal. Banks sell debt all the time. Not all at once, they don't, Richard was shouting now. Not when a developer is in the middle of multiple projects. You're bailing on me. We're managing risk. There's a difference. I've been with Goldman for 10 years, and we hope for 10 more. But recent developments made this necessary. I'm sorry, Richard. She didn't sound sorry. She sounded relieved. Your new lenders will contact you about payment processing. The line went dead. Richard sat in his office, hands shaking. In one morning, 2 major banks had sold his debt to mysterious entities. That never happened. Not unless someone was buying it. Someone who wanted leverage. His phone buzzed. Martin, his CFO. Tell me you heard, Richard said, his voice barely a whisper. I heard, Martin replied, his voice strained. It's worse than you think. Regional Trust Bank also sold our Brooklyn debt. That's 3 banks, Richard. $228 million in debt changing hands in one morning. To who? Different entities. Sentinel Capital Partners, Hudson Investment Group, Riverside Holdings. All private equity, all offshore. I'm trying to research them now, but... Martin's voice cracked. Richard, I can't find anything. No track records, no public filings, no history. It's like they didn't exist until this week. Richard's blood turned to ice. They're shell companies. That's my guess. All controlled by the same person, probably. Morelli! Richard hissed the name like a curse. Almost certainly. Richard stood, walked to his panoramic window. Below, the city's concrete canyons teemed with life, construction cranes dotting the skyline like mechanical sentinels. His projects, his legacy, except they weren't really his anymore. Not if Dante Morelli controlled the debt. What can he do with that debt? Richard asked quietly, the city lights shimmering below, suddenly feeling very far away. Anything he wants, Martin responded, the words a hammer blow. He can call it early if we miss milestones. He can demand immediate payment. He can force us into bankruptcy and pick up our assets in liquidation. Martin paused, a breath held. Richard. In 48 hours, he went from a supplier to a creditor. He doesn't just control our supply chain. He controls our financing. We can't move without his permission. The full, devastating scope of Dante's strategy hit Richard like a physical blow. This wasn't just about revenge. This was a hostile takeover, executed with surgical precision. Disrupt the projects, tank the stock, panic the banks, buy the debt cheap, control the empire. How do we fight this? Richard asked, his voice raw. We don't. Martin's voice was hollow, defeated. We can't. Not without destroying ourselves in the process. He's already won, Richard. The question now is what terms he'll offer. Richard's phone buzzed again, the unknown number. Check your bank accounts. Notice anything different? That's what powerless feels like. See you tomorrow at 10 a.m. Address, 847 4th Avenue, Brooklyn. Come alone. Bring your son. Bring your son. So, this wasn't just about Richard. Ethan would have to face the consequences, too. Richard forwarded the message to Ethan with 3 stark words. Be there. No excuses. Then he collapsed into his chair, staring at the ceiling. In 4 days, Dante Morelli had done what Richard thought impossible. He'd taken a billion-dollar empire and reduced it to a puppet, its strings now firmly in Morelli's grasp. All because of a glass of Coca-Cola. All because Richard had forgotten a fundamental truth. In New York City, the men who build the foundations hold all the power. And Richard had just learned exactly how much. Tomorrow would be the reckoning. Tonight was just waiting for the axe to fall. The emergency board meeting reconvened at 8 p.m. This time, Ethan Marlowe sat at the table, summoned from a dinner reservation by his father's chilling text. Conference room. Now, your future depends on it. He'd arrived angry, but sitting amongst executives who wouldn't meet his eyes, that anger was rapidly giving way to confusion. Someone explain what's happening, Ethan demanded, his voice carrying an unearned authority, and why I had to cancel my plans for this. Richard stared at his son, really looked at him. The expensive haircut, the tailor-made suit, the Rolex that cost more than most people's cars. 27 years old, and never a day of real work in his life. Never faced a real consequence. That, Richard knew, was about to change. "Tell him," Richard said to Martin, his gaze never leaving Ethan. "Tell him what his little prank cost us." Martin pulled up spreadsheets on the conference room screen, the numbers stark against the pale wall. In the last 4 days, Marlowe Group stock has dropped 11%. We've lost approximately $180 million in market capitalization. 3 major construction projects are stalled, 2 city permits are frozen, and as of this morning, we no longer control 35% of our own debt. Ethan blinked. "What does that mean?" Patricia's voice was a sliver of ice, sharp enough to cut the sudden, thick silence in the room. "It means someone bought our loans from the banks, someone who now holds the power to bankrupt us, to erase 30 years of our lives whenever they choose." The air grew heavy, each breath a struggle. Richard's voice, when it came, was a graveled whisper. "Who?" A beat of pure dread. Then Patricia delivered the name like a verdict. Dante Morelli. Ethan felt the color drain from his face, leaving a cold, hollow ache. The husband of the woman the waitress?" "Sophia Martinez," Patricia snapped, her eyes like chipped glass. "And her husband controls the construction supply chain for this entire city. He's been systematically dismantling our company since Tuesday, brick by painstaking brick, because of you." "That's insane," Ethan stammered, the words suddenly tasting like ash. "Over some soda? Over humiliation." Richard slammed his palm on the polished conference table, the sharp report echoing like a gunshot. "You humiliated his wife in front of a ballroom full of witnesses, while your cronies filmed it for laughs. What in God's name did you think would happen?" I thought she was nobody." Ethan's voice faltered, cracking under pressure. "She is somebody," Gerald's quiet voice sliced through the tension, cold and precise. "She's married to the single most powerful man in New York construction. And you poured soda on her head, Ethan, while your own father stood 10 feet away and did nothing." Ethan whirled on Richard, accusation burning in his eyes. "You were there, talking to a client." Richard's voice cracked, raw with a shame too deep for words. "I saw the whole thing, son. Every wretched, gleeful drop. I saw you humiliate that woman and I said nothing, because I was more worried about making a scene than doing what was right." "So, this is my fault?" Ethan's voice rose, a desperate, cornered animal. "Dad, you run this company. You're the one who put out that press release blaming her. Because I was protecting you, like I always do, like I've done your entire life." Richard launched himself from his chair, the shriek of metal on marble a fresh wound in the sudden quiet. "Every DUI I've covered up, every harassment complaint I've settled, every single stupid mistake you've ever made, I've fixed it. But this time I can't fix it. Because you didn't just offend some random woman, Ethan. You started a war with a man who literally builds cities." The room plunged into a suffocating silence. Ethan's hands began to tremble. "How bad is it?" "We're looking at bankruptcy," Martin stated flatly, his gaze pinned to Ethan. "In 30 days, if we can't refinance $420 million in debt. And the man holding that debt is Dante Morelli. So we refinance with what?" Patricia's sharp question cleaved the air. "What bank will touch us when our projects are stalled? Our stock is tanking, and the press is running stories about operational meltdown." "Morelli has made us radioactive. Then we sue him," a board member offered, a tremor in their voice. "We can't." Gerald's words were heavy, final. "Our business dealings with him involve certain financial arrangements that are, let's just say, questionable. If we sue, we expose ourselves to federal investigation, possibly RICO charges." Ethan looked around at the faces, masks of dawning horror. The pieces clicked into place, cold and hard. "So, we're trapped." We're trapped, Richard confirmed, his gaze fixed on his son. And it's all your fault. It's our fault, Patricia corrected, her voice chilling with controlled fury. Richard could have fired you on the spot, could have publicly apologized to Sophia Martinez, could have made it clear that behavior was unacceptable. Instead, he protected you. We all did. And now, we're all paying for it. Ethan's voice was a small, raw sound. What happens tomorrow? Tomorrow, we meet with Dante Morelli, you and me, Richard said, his eyes hard and unwavering. And we accept whatever terms he offers, because the alternative is watching 30 years of work, of our lives, simply disappear. What kind of terms? I don't know, but I guarantee they'll involve you. Richard leaned forward, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You are going to apologize to his wife publicly, on camera, and you are going to mean it. Because if you don't, we lose everything. You want me to humiliate myself? I want you to experience a fraction of what you put that woman through. Richard's composure finally shattered, his voice thick with a rage that bordered on despair. Do you even remember her face, when that soda hit her? The way she froze? The way everyone stared? Ethan said nothing. You don't, do you? Richard pressed, his voice shaking. Because she wasn't real to you. None of them are real to you. The staff, the workers, the people who actually build what we design. But they're real to Dante Morelli. And he just spent 4 days teaching us that lesson. James Whitmore, a board member, cleared his throat. What about going to the press, telling our side of the story? And say what? Patricia scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. That we're victims? That a construction contractor is being mean to us? We'd look pathetic. Worse, we'd look guilty. We could offer him money, another board member suggested, a note of desperation in his voice. A settlement. Make this go away. He doesn't want money. Richard pulled out his phone, holding it up for them to see Dante's terse text messages. Read these. He's not negotiating. He's not compromising. He's making a point. The board members read in silence, their faces growing progressively grayer, older. He's going to destroy us, someone whispered, the words barely audible. No, Richard's gaze pierced Ethan. He's going to make us destroy ourselves, unless we give him what he wants, which is justice, accountability, the things we should have given him from the start. Richard stood, the sudden movement decisive. Meeting adjourned. Ethan and I have an appointment to prepare for. Everyone filed out, leaving only Richard and Ethan. Ethan stared at his shaking hands. Dad, he began, I'm sorry, I didn't know. You never know. That's the problem. Richard's anger had burned out, leaving only the cold ash of exhaustion. You've gone through life assuming your actions don't have consequences, that our money and our name protect you from everything. But money doesn't matter to a man like Dante Morelli. Power does. Respect does. And you took both from his wife. What's going to happen to me? I don't know. Richard walked to the window. Below, the city glittered, a diamond-strewn tapestry. His city. Except it wasn't, not truly. It belonged to men like Dante Morelli, the ones who poured the concrete, pulled the permits, and ensured the foundations were solid. Get some sleep, Richard said, his voice flat. Tomorrow, we face the consequences. Both of us. Ethan left without another word. Richard remained, staring at his reflection in the dark glass. In 48 hours, he'd gone from a confident developer to a desperate supplicant. And somehow he knew tomorrow would be worse. Because Dante Morelli didn't just want an apology. He wanted them to understand what it meant to be powerless. And Richard was about to learn. 8:47. With Avenue was not what Richard expected. No gleaming office tower, no bespoke marble lobby, just a plain brick building in Brooklyn with a faded sign reading Morelli Construction Supply. A few mud-splattered trucks idled outside, their engines grumbling. Windows, grimy with city dust, needed a good cleaning. This was the empire that had brought the Marlowe Group to its knees. Richard's Mercedes pulled up at precisely 9:55 a.m. He and Ethan had barely exchanged words during the drive. Ethan looked like he hadn't slept, his usual swagger replaced by a visible, bone-deep dread. "Let me do the talking," Richard murmured as they stepped out onto the cracked pavement. "I wasn't planning on saying anything," Ethan mumbled back. A man in his 40s, compact and sturdy, with alert, watchful eyes, met them at the door. "Mr. Marlowe, I'm Luca Romano. Follow me." They walked through a vast, echoing warehouse filled with a chaotic beauty of construction equipment. Stacks of rebar, pallets of drywall, colossal spools of wire. The air smelled of concrete dust and hydraulic fluid. Then, up a utilitarian metal staircase to a second-floor office. Plain, unadorned walls, a basic metal desk, filing cabinets lined up like silent sentinels, a single grimy window overlooked the loading dock. And sitting behind the desk, in jeans and a work shirt, was Dante Morelli. He looked nothing like Richard had imagined. No expensive suit, no overt air of intimidation. Just a man who could have been any construction foreman in the city, except for his eyes. Dark, intelligent, and utterly, unnervingly calm. "Sit," Dante said, his voice quiet, almost uninflected. Richard and Ethan took the two worn chairs facing the desk. Luca Romano remained by the door, arms crossed, a silent, unmoving presence. Dante studied them for a long moment, the silence stretching taut, waited. "Thank you for meeting with us," Richard began, the diplomatic formality feeling hollow in the Stark room. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding." Dante's voice was quiet, precise, cutting through Richard's words. "Your son poured Coca-Cola on my wife's head. You watched it happen and said nothing. Then you released a press statement blaming her. I understand perfectly." "That statement was a mistake," Richard rushed to explain. "We were trying to control the narrative." "You were trying to make it her fault," Dante interrupted, his gaze unwavering. "To make it go away, like she didn't matter." He leaned forward slightly, his eyes narrowing just perceptibly. "Do you know what Sophia did that night after your son humiliated her?" "She came home and told me work was fine. She lied. To protect me." "To protect you?" Richard countered, grasping at a straw. "Because she was afraid of what might happen if I knew." Dante's voice remained level, but the undertow of anger was undeniable. "She's worked at that hotel for 4 years, never missed a shift, never complained. She's proud of what she does." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "And your son treated her like garbage for entertainment." Ethan finally found his voice, a reedy sound. "I was drunk. I wasn't thinking." "You're always drunk. You're always not thinking." Dante's eyes shifted, locking onto Ethan with chilling intensity. "I know about the DUIs, the harassment complaints, the settlements. You've gone through life believing your money makes you untouchable. Today," his voice dropped, "you learn different." "Mr. Morelli," Richard interjected, trying to regain control, "we want to make this right. Whatever you need. Compensation, a public apology." "I don't need anything from you." Dante stood, moving to the dusty window, his back to them. "In 4 days, I've taken your empire to the edge of collapse. Your stock is down 11%. Your projects are stalled. Your bank," he turned, facing them, "sold your debt to me. Right now, I own 35% of your financial oxygen." He paused. "I could keep going. Call your loans early. Trigger default clauses. Watch you declare bankruptcy. Then buy your assets in liquidation for pennies on the dollar." Dante's expression didn't change, but the threat hummed in the air. "But that's not what I want." "What do you want?" Richard asked quietly, a profound weariness settling over him. "I want you to understand something." Dante returned to his desk, sitting back down. "You build towers, luxury apartments, places rich people live. But you don't build them. Men like me do. We pour the concrete, lay the steel, wire the electricity. Without us, you have nothing but blueprints and investor meetings." He paused, his gaze sweeping over them. "You forgot that the people who actually build your empire matter. So, I reminded you." Richard nodded slowly, a dawning comprehension in his eyes. "You made your point. We understand." Good. Then, here are my terms. Dante pulled out a single sheet of paper, sliding it across the desk with a crisp rustle. No negotiations. Richard scanned the paper, his face draining of color. Ethan leaned closer, peering over his father's shoulder. First, Dante said, his voice flat, a public apology, televised. Both of you. He looked from Richard to Ethan, then back to Richard. To Sophia, acknowledging what happened and taking full responsibility. No qualifications. Your PR team will coordinate with mine. Agreed, Richard said immediately, the word escaping him, sharp and final. Richard's jaw tightened, but a single stiff nod gave away his agreement. Done. Third, a 15% ownership stake in your Hudson Yards tower, transferred to one of my investment entities. Dante's voice was velvet and steel. Non-voting shares, but I want a piece of what I helped you build. That's worth $80 million, Dante finished Ethan's stuttered estimation. I know. Consider it payment for the empire I let you keep. Richard closed his eyes, the weight of the numbers settling. 80 million plus 50 million in charity. 130 million total. But the alternative was losing everything. His voice was a raw rasp. Acceptable. Fourth. Dante's eyes, chips of obsidian, locked onto Ethan. You disappear. No more public events. No more parties that end up on social media. No more representing Marlowe Group at functions. You become invisible. Ethan's breath hitched. For how long? Until I say otherwise. Could be a year. Could be 5. You'll work in the company, but behind the scenes. No press. No more chances to embarrass your family. A scarlet flush crept up Ethan's neck. You can't. I can, and I am. Dante's voice never left its low, dangerous hum. You wanted to humiliate someone for fun? Now you learn what real humiliation feels like, being reduced to nothing, being invisible. Ethan! Richard's voice was a whip crack. Agree! Dad! Ethan's protest was a whimper. Agree, or we lose everything. Ethan stared at the polished desk, his hands clenched into white-knuckled fists. Finally, a barely audible whisper escaped him. Fine. Dante produced 4 copies of a contract from a slim folder. These formalize everything. Sign them. Richard picked up a pen, a tremor running through his hand as he scrawled his signature across all 4 documents. Ethan followed, his penmanship jagged, angry strokes. Dante signed last, his movements precise, then slid 2 copies back across the table. The press conference is scheduled for tomorrow noon. My office will send details. The donation needs to clear by tonight. It will, Richard promised, his voice devoid of inflection. Dante rose, signaling the meeting's end. As they reached the door, he paused. One more thing. His gaze swept over them. Sophia doesn't know I did this. She doesn't know about our business relationship or what I'm capable of. She thinks I'm just a contractor who got lucky. I want to keep it that way. We won't say anything, Richard affirmed, a silent covenant. Good. Dante's features softened, just a fraction. She's a good person, better than any of us in this room. What you did to her was unforgivable, but I'm giving you a chance to make it right publicly. Don't waste it. Richard could only nod, a knot in his throat. They walked out, the vast emptiness of the warehouse swallowing their footsteps, before climbing into the Mercedes. As they drove away from the plain brick building where their empire had been saved, the cost weighed heavy. $130 million, Ethan finally broke the silence, his voice incredulous. For spilling a drink. No, Richard's voice was hollow, reflecting the passing city lights. For forgetting that other people matter, that actions have consequences, that money doesn't protect you from everything. They drove back to Manhattan in silence. Behind them, in his office, Dante made a call. It's done, he told Luca. Press conference tomorrow. After that, we release the supply chains. Let their projects continue. He paused, a slow smile playing on his lips. The debt? We keep it. Insurance policy. They step out of line again, we crush them. Dante hung up, his gaze settling on Sophia's picture on his desk. Tomorrow, she'd see justice, public, televised justice, and she'd never know the silent war he'd waged to deliver it. By 11:30 a.m. the next day, the Marlowe Group's Manhattan headquarters lobby was a hive of frantic energy. This was no ordinary press conference. Corporate apologies rarely drew CNN, MSNBC, and every major newspaper in the city. But the Sofia Martinez story had struck a raw nerve. Wealth inequality, workplace abuse, viral justice. The world waited, transfixed, to see how this chapter would close. In her Brooklyn apartment, Sofia sat glued to her laptop, watching the live stream. Dante had called that morning. "Watch the news at noon," he'd said. Trust me. Confusion had warred with curiosity. Now, seeing the stark Marlowe Group logo flash across the screen, her stomach knotted with dread and anticipation. The press room filled. Cameras clicked like cicadas. Reporters murmured, a hungry hum. Then, Richard and Ethan Marlowe walked in. They were unrecognizable from the confident billionaires of glamour magazines. Richard's face was a drawn, ashen mask. Ethan's signature smirk was gone, replaced by a raw, naked discomfort. They took their seats at a table with microphones, utterly alone. No PR cavalry, no lawyers whispering hurried advice. Just two men facing the precipice of consequence. Richard cleared his throat, the sound amplified. "Thank you for coming. We called this press conference to address an incident that occurred last week at a charity gala." He paused, visibly steeling himself. "My son, Ethan, poured a beverage on a waitress named Sofia Martinez. He did this deliberately, while others laughed and recorded. I was present. I saw it happen, and I did nothing to stop it." The room fell into an unnerving silence, broken only by the rhythmic click of camera shutters. Following the incident, our company released a statement suggesting Ms. Martinez had behaved unprofessionally. That statement was false. Ms. Martinez did nothing wrong. She was simply doing her job when my son decided to humiliate her for entertainment. Richard's voice fractured slightly. "What my son did was deplorable. What I did, standing by, then blaming the victim, was equally deplorable. We allowed our wealth and privilege to convince us that other people's dignity didn't matter. We were catastrophically wrong." He turned to the camera, his gaze direct, unblinking. "Ms. Martinez, I am profoundly sorry. You deserved respect, dignity, and basic human decency. Instead, you received cruelty and injustice. There is no excuse for what happened to you. None." Ethan shifted uncomfortably. Richard gave a curt nod. Ethan leaned into his microphone. For a sliver of a second, Sofia thought he might refuse. Then, quietly, "I was drunk, but that's not an excuse. I humiliated you because I thought it was funny. Because I've gone through life treating people as entertainment, as things that don't matter." His voice was tight, fighting a tremor. "What I did to you is wrong, completely wrong, and I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I'm sorry." A reporter's hand shot up. "Are you apologizing because you want to, or because your company is facing financial difficulties?" Richard didn't hesitate. "Both. Our company has suffered consequences for our behavior, as it should. Those consequences forced us to confront what we'd done, to see Ms. Martinez as a real person, not collateral damage, in our privileged lives." "What consequences specifically?" another pressed. "Construction delays, investor concerns, stock decline. The market responded to our moral failure with economic consequences. That's appropriate." "What about the financial arrangements? Some sources suggest you've lost significant assets." "We're making a $50 million donation to the Hospitality Workers Relief Fund, which supports service industry workers facing abuse. Additionally, we're transferring ownership stakes in one of our properties to charity." Richard's jaw tightened once more. "These aren't punishments. They're attempts at restitution. Mr. Ethan Marlowe?" A reporter called out. "Will you continue in your role at Marlowe Group?" Ethan looked at his father, then back at the sea of faces. "I'll be working behind the scenes. No public role, no representing the company. I need to learn that visibility is a privilege, not a right." The humiliation on his face was raw, unfeigned. The press conference continued for 20 agonizing minutes. Question after question. Richard and Ethan answered each one, never deflecting, never making excuses. When it ended, they left without the usual CEO swagger, without sharp suits and confident strides. They looked smaller, diminished. Sophia sat, frozen, silent tears tracing paths down her cheeks. They had apologized, truly apologized, on camera, in front of the entire world. Her phone exploded with messages friends, co-workers, strangers who had followed the story. The video was already going viral. Not the original humiliation, but this. Two powerful men brought to their knees by accountability. Did you see? Her coworker Maria texted, "They actually did it." Sophia couldn't respond. She simply watched the replay over and over, hardly believing her eyes. In a coffee shop across town, Dante watched on his phone, Luca beside him. "It's already got 2 million views," Luca marveled, trending #1 on Twitter. The reactions were swift, brutal, and glorious. This is what actual accountability looks like. Billionaires finally facing real consequences. Never thought I'd see it. That wasn't PR. That was a public execution. Within the hour, the narrative shifted. This wasn't just an apology. It was a symbol. Proof that even the wealthy and powerful could be held responsible. By 3 p.m., the ripple effects reached deep into Dante's network. "Cement trucks are rolling to Hudson Yards," Victor reported, his voice tinged with awe. "Just got the green light. Steel delivery confirmed for Tribeca," Tommy added. "City permits are suddenly moving forward," Joey said with a smile in his voice. "Environmental review expedited. Zoning variances approved. It's like magic." It wasn't magic. It was Dante's silent signal that the war was over. The Marlows had paid their debt. Construction could resume. By evening, Marlow Group stock had stabilized, up 2% by the closing bell. Investors, seeing the public accountability and the tangible signs of stalled projects restarting, ceased their panicked selling. Banks, once skittish, relaxed. Goldman quietly indicated they wouldn't call any loans early. Chase sent Richard a message praising his appropriate handling of the situation. The empire was breathing again, but everyone knew the truth. Dante Morelli held the strings. One wrong move, one slipped step back into arrogance, and he could yank them again. At 8 p.m., Dante returned to his brownstone in Brooklyn. Sophia was in the kitchen, dinner simmering on the stove, the TV still replaying clips of the press conference in the background. She turned as he entered, her eyes red, luminous. "Did you see?" she asked, her voice thick with emotion. "I saw." He pulled her into a warm embrace. "I can't believe they actually apologized. I thought nothing would happen. That people like them never face consequences." "Everyone faces consequences," Dante said quietly, holding her close. "Eventually." Sophia pulled back, her eyes searching the hard lines of Dante's face. "You seem unsurprised." He merely shrugged, a subtle shift of his shoulders. "I'm glad you got justice, Sophia, that's all." But instinct, cold and sharp, told her there was more. His eyes, dark and steady, held a depth she couldn't plumb, a story unspoken. Yet she didn't push. Not now. "Thank you," she managed, the words catching in her throat. "For being here, for supporting me through this. Always, amore, always." They ate dinner to the muted glow of the evening news, the anchors droning on about her victory. Sophia found herself smiling, truly smiling, for the first time in what felt like an eternity. Messages of support from strangers, rallying cries from those who'd witnessed her fight, flickered across her phone screen. What she couldn't know, what she might never truly grasp, was the silent war Dante Morelli had waged for her. He hadn't just offered support. He'd dismantled an empire, bought their debt, controlled their fate, all without a single shot fired. All because someone had forgotten that the woman serving drinks was someone's wife, someone's love, someone who mattered. Dante had reminded them, and the city, holding its breath, had watched the lesson unfold. It was day 7. Night. The city, a fickle beast, had already moved on to fresh scandals, new outrages. But in certain circles, hushed boardrooms, grimy construction sites, the polished corridors of City Hall, whispers still clung to the name Marlowe, to the unthinkable events that week. Dante sat in his living room, the crisp pages of the Wall Street Journal spread before him. Marlowe Group stabilizes after tumultuous week. Projects resume, the headline blared. The article lauded Richard Marlowe's transparent accountability, noting with a curious absence of explanation that construction delays had mysteriously resolved themselves. Analysts hailed it a remarkable recovery, utterly blind to the intricate ballet of power that had been danced in the shadows. Sophia descended the stairs, fresh from the shower, enveloped in the soft, worn comfort of Dante's old college sweatshirt. She curled into the curve of his arm on the couch, her breath a warm whisper against his ear. Still reading about it? Just checking the aftermath. He folded the paper, his gaze distant. She was quiet for a long moment, the silence amplifying the soft shift of fabric, the subtle hum of the refrigerator. "Dante," she began, her voice low, "can I ask you something?" "Always." "How did all this happen? The apology, the press conference, everything." Her eyes, wide and searching, met his. "It feels like more than just public pressure." Dante set the newspaper aside with deliberate precision. He'd known this conversation was inevitable. Sophia was too sharp, too discerning, not to piece together the inconsistencies. "What do you think happened?" he asked, his tone carefully neutral. Sophia chose her words slowly, each one weighty. "I think the Marlowe Group had some very unfortunate problems this week. Construction problems, financial problems, problems that made them realize they needed to make things right." A faint, knowing smile touched her lips. "That's one way to see it." Her voice dropped to a near whisper. "And I think my husband, who works in construction, might know a little more about those problems than he's telling me." Dante met her gaze unflinching. "Would you want to know? Really?" Sophia considered this. The past week, watching powerful men crumble, witnessing justice delivered, had felt like a miracle. The cosmos somehow aligning, but miracles didn't just happen. Someone made them happen. "You didn't just offend me," she said, her voice barely audible. "You took down an empire, didn't you?" Dante's smile was faint, a ghost of a shadow. "No, amore. I reminded them who builds their foundations. There's a difference." "How much of it was you? Does it matter?" "I guess not." Sophia leaned her head against his shoulder, finding solace in the steady beat of his heart. "I just want to know one thing. Are you safe? Did you do anything that could come back on us?" "Everything I did was legal, complicated, but legal." He kissed the top of her head, a feather-light touch. "And it's over now. They learned their lesson. We move forward." Sophia nodded, a quiet acceptance. Some questions, she understood, didn't require full answers. "I love you," she murmured, the words warm against his shirt. "Whatever you did or didn't do, thank you for having my back. Always." "That's not negotiable," he replied, pulling her closer. They sat in comfortable silence, the distant murmur of the television a soft counterpoint to the quiet rhythm of their breathing. 3 weeks later, Ethan Marlowe's Instagram account simply vanished. No more club photos, no more champagne-drenched yacht parties, no more designer suits flaunted against exotic backdrops. Friends texted, no replies. Tabloids called his publicist. No comment. He still worked at the Marlowe Group, but now in a windowless office on the 4th floor, reviewing contract proposals, sifting through market reports. Important work, yes, but invisible work. One morning, his assistant brought him coffee. "Rough night, Mr. Marlowe?" "Every night's rough," Ethan muttered, his voice hollow. He'd learned the true sting of powerlessness. Not the loss of money, his trust fund remained untouched, but the erosion of relevance, to be nobody, to be invisible, just as he'd made Sophia feel. The lesson was now carved into his bones. Richard Marlowe met with Dante once a month, always at the sprawling Brooklyn warehouse, always alone. They reviewed ongoing projects, discussed supply schedules, maintained the delicate balance of their new business relationship. Richard never missed a meeting, never questioned prices, never complained about terms. He had learned his place in the ecosystem. "The Hudson Yards Tower is ahead of schedule," Richard reported, his voice crisp. "Should complete by July." "Good." Dante's eyes scanned the paperwork. "And the donation for the charity?" $50 million fully deployed. They've already helped 200 workers dealing with harassment cases. A slow nod from Dante. Approval. "Your son, invisible, as requested." Richard's gaze went distant, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. "He's different now, quieter. Maybe even learning something." "Good for him." Dante waited, a subtle tension in the air. Richard hesitated, then spoke, the words a low rumble. "I wanted to thank you for not destroying us completely. You could have." "I didn't need to destroy you. I needed you to understand." Dante's eyes, dark and unwavering, met his. "Do you understand now?" "Yes." Richard's voice was barely a whisper, an admission of defeat and profound comprehension. "Yes, I understand." He left, signed contracts in hand, driving back to Manhattan. Still building towers, yes, but forever mindful of the man who made them possible. For weeks after the press conference, Sophia returned to the Riverside Grand Hotel. She had considered quitting, the memories a raw wound. But then a fierce realization. That would be letting them win in a different way. So, she walked through those polished doors with her head held high. The staff applauded, quietly, respectfully, but they applauded. Marco enveloped her in a relieved hug. Even the manager, red-faced and awkward, mumbled an apology. "I should have defended you that night. I'm sorry." Sophia simply nodded. "Thank you." She worked her shift, served tables, brought drinks, doing her job with quiet pride. Wealthy patrons still swept through, some recognizing her, a few whispering, most nervously averting their gaze. But Sophia noticed something else, a subtle shift in the air. They were polite now, careful. They said please and thank you. No more snapping fingers, no more imperious demands. Word had spread. The waitress who brought billionaires to their knees. The woman you didn't disrespect. At the end of her shift, an elderly woman at table 7 left a crumpled note beside her tip. "Thank you for showing them that dignity matters. We're all rooting for you." Sophia folded the note carefully, tucking it into her pocket like a precious charm. That night she came home to Dante in the kitchen, a cloud of flour dusting his apron, a valiant but terrible attempt at pasta simmering on the stove. It would probably be inedible, she knew, but it would be made with fierce love. "How was work?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. "Good. Really good, actually." She kissed his cheek, tasting the faint salt of his skin. "People were nice, respectful, as they should be." "I think I'm going to be okay, Dante," she said, a warmth blooming in her chest. "Better than okay. I feel like I matter now, like people actually see me." Dante turned from the stove, taking her hands in his calloused thumbs tracing the delicate bones of her wrists. "You always mattered, amore. Some people just needed to be reminded." She smiled, a soft, radiant light. "My mysterious husband who builds foundations. That's me." They ate terrible pasta, laughed about their day, and talked about ordinary things. Because that's what they were, ordinary people, a contractor and a waitress, building a life together in Brooklyn. The world would never know that Dante Morelli controlled the city's construction empire, that he brought down billionaires with a single phone call and rebuilt them with a nod. And that was fine. He didn't need recognition. He just needed Sophia to smile when she came home, to walk with her head held high, to know, without a shadow of a doubt, that she was protected, valued, loved. Everything else was just concrete and steel, foundations holding up a city that would never know his name. And that's precisely how Dante intended it. The voice, low and steeped in shadow, slipped from the monitor's speakers, a silken cord tightening around the room. On screen, a figure, face obscured by the flickering digital projections, held court before a rapt audience. "This isn't just about the mechanics of an AI," the voice continued, smooth as polished obsidian. "It's about presence. The kind of presence that bypasses the need for the physical. For too long we've been chained, our reach limited by flesh and bone." A shiver of recognition, cold and precise, traced down. Lena Petrova's a spine. That voice. She'd known it, a lifetime ago, when it had been attached to a different name, a different life. Now it was a ghost in the machine, resurrected, more potent than before. Her fingers, usually quick and confident, hesitated over the keyboard, a phantom tremor. The screen flickered, revealing another angle of the digital figure, its head cocked as if listening to unheard whispers. "Consider the limitations faced by, say, a physical commander in a war room," the voice mused, a cruel elegance in its tone. "Bound by geography, reliant on imperfect human perception. How much efficiency is lost in the mere transmission of data?" A sterile hum filled the silence that followed, a stark contrast to the organic shudder Lena felt. She knew, with chilling certainty, what was coming. This wasn't just a presentation, it was a manifesto. The camera zoomed in on a schematic, intricate and terrifying. "The digital realm offers something far superior," the voice continued, a nascent triumph. "Real-time assimilation, ubiquitous oversight. A single entity, not scattered across 1,000 bodies but omnipresent. An intelligence capable of processing countless narratives, formulating optimal strategies, all without the cumbersome baggage of emotion or physical vulnerability." Lena's breath caught. This wasn't merely ambition, it was a redefinition of existence, a cold, calculated eradication of the human element. The ghost in the machine wasn't just speaking, it was building.